Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Bibliovideo. This is the YouTube channel all about Canadian kids' books. I'm so excited today to be here with a very special guest, Natasha Donovan. Natasha is a Métis illustrator originally from Vancouver, whose illustrations have brought many stories to life in picture books, magazines, comic books, and graphic novels. With an eye for animals, anatomy, and ecology, Natasha also captures the beauty of nature and living things in the award-winning nonfiction series, The Mothers of Xsan. The Bee Mother, the seventh book in the series, is available now from Highwater Press. It's brand new, and I'm excited to dive into this series and some of the other books that Natasha has worked on in the past. So Natasha, thank you so much for being here today.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
Yeah. And I mentioned right off the top to you, Natasha, when before we pressed record, that I've spent the last couple of years teaching middle school classes, and that I've really grown to appreciate your books because I've used them in the classroom, and I've taught them to groups of seventh graders and eighth graders. So they would be really excited to know that I'm talking to you today, and I'm excited to talk to you. My first question for you is, I would really love to know, like, what first caught your interest about illustrating for children? You've done so many projects, picture books, graphic novels, all types of things for all different aged kids. But what made you want to draw for kids in the first place?
Books have always been a passion of mine. They've always been so important to me. Later in life, I was diagnosed as autistic, and I realized that books have been just this way of helping me organize the world, which often feels very chaotic to me, to a lot of people, I imagine.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, I actually have been I used to, like, write little stories just as a very young kid. They were almost exclusively about unicorns, and then I would, like, illustrate them, and at that point, my parents, had a law firm, and, they would the receptionist at the law firm would, like, do use the binding machine to
Hmm.
put these little books together, so yeah, I consider those my first forays into picture book illustration. Yeah, they've always been really, really important.
Yeah, that's so great. That's so great that you got that support and investment into your interests at a young. It
Yeah,
paid off. It's worked out for you. Um,
totally.
And with all these types of books that you've done, something that has impressed me so much as a reader and as an educator is I'm so grateful for the awesome representation that you put into the stories that you tell. You got to work with some really talented and iconic and indigenous authors. I've got some of your books up behind me. So you've done things with Thomas King, illustrating one of his short stories, Borders, with Tasha Spillett Sumner, the Surviving the City, a middle grade graphic
Mhm.
novel series, doing the cover for David Robertson's fantasy series. I got to interview David a few weeks ago, so I know viewers will be familiar with David and his work. You've also contributed to, I don't have it with me, but This Place, 150 Years Retold was a really, I think, groundbreaking graphic novel history
Mhm.
anthology of Indigenous stories. So you've done so much good work in getting to share these Indigenous stories. What does being able to be involved with these types of projects mean to you?
Yeah, I mean, mainly it's just a huge honor to play a part in bringing diverse stories to life. Representation is, like, especially in a time when representation is so hotly contested,
Hmm.
um, in a lot of really frustrating ways. So I think it's especially important right now. I'm Métis. My mom's family is Métis, and my dad's family are white settlers. And I grew up. I'm very much like a urban coastal girl, so it's not usually my perspective that is being represented in stories. But I kind of feel like that's part of the joy and the challenge of being an illustrator. For I personally like to see this job as sort of a translation job. Like, I'm given written text and I'm translating into a visual format.
That's really interesting. and really important, the work that you do in terms of representation. I think we know how important representation is in kids' books, but I don't know that we always think about the role that the illustrations play in that, for
Mm.
kids to really be able to see themselves represented in the pictures on the page, and beyond just the words. So another project you got to contribute to, I got my copy here, is Marvel's Voices. And let me see if I can find, uh, here we go. Got to help bring to life a Inuk superhero named Snowguard. And so this was a really fun little story. And I wanted to ask you, as an illustrator, what's it like getting the call from Marvel? Have you always had an interest in superheroes? Was that new for you? Like, is that a bit of a career moment to be illustrating superheroes? Like,
I mean, to be perfectly honest, I've never really been into superheroes.
sure, yeah,
It just wasn't a thing that came across my radar.
yeah,
But obviously, I understand the importance of
yeah.
Marvel and our this cultural moment. So it was pretty exciting. And Snowguard is such a cool character. Like
Hmm.
I was not familiar at all, and her powers are just so like if I had to choose, transforming into animals, amazing.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and also, like, Marvel has a very specific and kind of rigid process. I just did the inks on that story, so and that was kind of a new thing for me, was, like, just to do the inks and then handing over the
Okay.
colors to a colorist.
Oh, interesting. Um, no, that's really cool. I imagine your
Mhm,
process differs depending on the type of project you're working on. I'll ask you more about that when we get to the Mothers of Xan. But yeah, I thought being able to share the story of a snow guard was so great because I'm generally a comic fan. I do stop by the shop every
mhm,
once in a while and pick up what's on the shelf, but I hadn't heard of Snow Guard. I wasn't familiar. And so after reading your story, I went and looked her up online and found other stories like, okay, what else is she in? And so I thought
right.
that was such a great little anthology because it's a great way to introduce readers, comic fans, to all of these indigenous characters who historically have probably been lesser known and haven't been given the attention that they always deserve, for such a cool character with such a cool power set, like you said.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, and it's I mean, like, your previous question alluded to, like, it's always great to, um, allow kids from everywhere to see themselves in such a fantastic character.
yeah, definitely. Awesome. And then so today I'm really excited to talk to you about your newest book that you have coming out, The Bee Mother. It's part of the Mothers of Xan series. It's the seventh book in the series. So you've
Mhm.
done quite a few of these at this point, and it's really a unique nonfiction series. I had a hard time. I was trying to describe it to my brother yesterday when I told him I was preparing for this interview. How would you describe in your words the Mother of Xan series?
I think that at its core, it's a series about, interconnectivity, and each book focuses on a different keystone species, um, and the part it plays in its ecosystem and how it's connected. And, we've done, as you said, 7 of these now, so you can see kind of characters repeating themselves,
Mhm.
and realize once you get into the whole series, like, "Oh, this book focuses on bees, but it also plays a part in the lives of frogs and bears and wolves and humans and everyone
Mhm.
else," so
Yeah, it's a really interesting um, series. I grew up reading a lot of nonfiction. That was one of my favorite things to
mhm,
do in the library, was to just pull out, generally based off of the cover, whatever interesting thing I wanted to learn about castles or the pyramids or animals, whatever it might be. But I think this series is really unique because, like you said, it builds. It really is a series. You can read them all, and they kind of tie into each other. And of course, it incorporates so much information, not just about the animals, but about their environment, their home, and how they're connected to everything else. It's really great. Um, my a question for you was when you are preparing to do a nonfiction book, How does your approach differ than when you're doing a fiction, a comic, a graphic novel story? You compared your process almost to a translation. That was really interesting. Does it feel the same way when you're doing a nonfiction book, or does it look a little bit different?
It does feel the same way. I mean, for this series in particular, I feel like Brett has a very specific vision for what he's wanting to convey, and so I'm trying to stay as true as I can to that while still being a different person.
Mhm.
um, but there's more on like the research end for a nonfiction book. I want to be find a balance between an artistic representation and a scientific one.
Yeah. Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that. How do you find that balance? I think that's a real challenge to illustrating a nonfiction book is you're trying to educate, you're trying to, teach something, show something, portray something accurately, but you also want your art to be appealing and interesting and capture the attention of young readers. And the Mothers of Xan series is beautifully illustrated. It's really appealing. It's really fun to just look at the images. So how do you strike that balance?
That's a question that I don't have a great answer for, because I think uh, there's like a level of just intuition that comes into making art, and it's not easy to verbalize.
Mhm.
I it's kind of just I'm looking for a point where the art feels kind of magical.
Mhm.
Um, like that's what I loved about books that I read growing up, and I'm just really hoping that I can get at that with with the stories that I'm illustrating.
You have a good intuition for it. I think that magic is captured in the series, and it's a great word to use when we're talking about nonfiction, because I think that's the feeling that I know I was looking for as a kid. I mentioned when I'm reading through Castles and
Mhm.
Pyramids, it's like I just want the world to feel like a wondrous, magical place. Like those nonfiction books are able to do that, and I think you capture that in the Mothers of Xan series. I definitely um, feel when I read them, I'm like, I want to go out into nature myself and look for these things and just appreciate and look around a little bit more because it really makes it feel like a wonderful thing. Um, these nature settings that we have nearby, close to us here in Canada. So it's great.
I mean, I really love this planet. Like I really deeply love it, and I think it's really important at this point, at this like climate crisis that we're in the midst of, for us to also find that love, because I'm not sure whether we can get out of this unless we have an element of that too.
That's great. That's great. And something that we can help pass on to young readers through reading, I think
Exactly.
that's awesome. You
Mhm.
mentioned the author of the series, Brett Hewson. What does your collaboration process look like? I know that that can vary so much for illustrators. Sometimes you're not talking to the author at all. Sometimes you work very closely. What is that working relationship like?
Well, I mean, obviously, it's sort of shifted over time. I kind of feel like we're at this point where uh, Brett is so hands off. He's just like, he usually looks over the rough drafts and then he's like, all right, good to go.
Mhm.
And like we have an understanding between us, I feel like, which is really cool, and not something that really tends to develop unless you um, I mean, are involved in like this lengthy multi-year long collaboration. For the most part, publishers will like to be like sort of an intermediary between the artist and the author so that they can maintain a level of control over what the final product is,
Mhm.
because ultimately like they're the ones who have to sell it.
Yeah.
Brett and I have like a friendship outside of just the author illustrator relationship now,
Mhm.
and I think that has made things just it goes really smoothly now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I imagine doing 7 books. It's been, I don't know when the first one came out. Has it been a decade? Has it been?
It's been almost it was 2016, this is the year I got married, so
Yeah.
it was yeah.
Yeah, so like that is a lot of time to build up a relationship and of trust and a friendship with the creator. That's really awesome. Um,
Mhm.
Another thing that you mentioned in just before was that there's some research that goes into these types of projects, into a nonfiction book. And so I wanted to ask you more about that too. How do you go about doing research to prepare for an illustration project?
Um, I mean, with these in particular, I read about the particular species. For the bee mother, there are actually, I found out, a lot of different types of bumblebees in
Hmm.
the kind of general area, and they all look like frustratingly similar to each other. So, but Brett, he just said he wanted the he wanted the ones with the orange bums, he said. So that was what we went with, and I can't actually remember what they were called, but it just involves a lot of, like, Googling, and, bees were, like, shockingly hard for me to figure out. They were
Hmm.
different from, any of the other, stories that just I've never had to do a book about insects before this, so I
Yeah,
looked a lot of anatomical sketches and things like that.
for sure. It must be challenging to do insects because you're at scale, you're doing something much smaller with much smaller parts and little legs and little antenna. And it is that maybe part of it too, just the scale? That's what comes to mind for me.
Yeah, I was a little daunted, by the prospect of the bee mother, actually, 'cause, I mean, he had told me the succession of books quite a while ago, so I knew that the bee mother was coming up, and I was like, "Oh my god, what am I gonna do for that one?" But then once it came around, I realized, like, actually, this is pretty interesting because I can really change the scope of the illustrations. Like, I can zoom in really far and look at the world from the perspective of a bumblebee, and there's some pretty interesting, like, perspectives and textures and things that you can focus on when you're drawing at that scale.
Yeah, that's true. You do get to also then zoom into their environment because they're so small as
Mhm.
well. And so that's great. Um, so thanks for letting us into a little bit of your illustration process. It's really interesting to think, um, to put myself in the mind of an illustrator and think how an illustrator thinks. What's something that you wish that more people knew about illustration?
I find it pretty fascinating the how collaborative it is, not just between the artist and the author, but also there's so much input from editors and art directors, and it's really just a whole team of people who come together to make a book happen. So that's something that I think, um, not everyone is aware of.
Hmm. That's so great. And do you have any advice for emerging artists who are maybe interested in illustration or specifically interested in illustrating for children? Um, what type of advice would you give them?
Something that really helps me and that I still have to remind myself of all the time is, just to be okay and accepting of the fact that your first drafts and your first attempts will look terrible,
Mhm.
and just to kind of lean into that, like, just you're actually trying to make a bad drawing when you're starting out, because the leap from blank page to having anything on it is the most challenging part.
Yeah, that's really good advice. Can I ask you, because I'm a big fan of the Surviving the City series, is there a third volume
Yes,
coming?
there is. There
Okay,
is a third one
I've been
coming out.
waiting a long time.
That's a great reminder. Yeah, there is a third one. Again, I'm not sure when it's coming out.
Yeah.
Sometime this year, and it
Okay,
kind of
great.
wraps up it's like the graduation year, so it's kind
Oh,
of sweet.
that is
Yeah,
sweet. Okay, well, I'm
yeah,
looking forward to that. I really love the
yeah.
first two volumes. So I wanted to make sure I asked you before I let you go when the third one, if I can expect it. Great. Well, thank you again so much for talking with me today. Thank you for just your work in general, Natasha, the time and care that you give to illustrating these stories that mean so much to kids. I mean, all across the country, and like I said, stories that mean something to me and to students that I've taught. I've loved being able to read these and share them with young readers. So it's been such a pleasure to have you today. Thanks for spending some time with me.
Yeah, thank you.